Hello, welcome to a podcast on the law and its impact on computing technology and business. This is Brian Gav. I'm a senior member of the IEEE and partner at the McDermott, Will & Emery law firm in Boston. The IEEE is presenting this podcast in conjunction with my column that appears each month in Computer Magazine, a publication of the IEEE's Computer Society. That column discusses legal issues relevant to people in the computer hardware, software, networking, and service businesses. In the last podcast, I discussed some best practices for working with your legal department. This podcast will discuss some issues that need to be considered when you're starting a software company, which is the topic of the October 2013 column in Computer Magazine. Joining me today is my co-author of the October 2013 column, Greg Hendershot. Greg founded Cakewalk Incorporated, a leading developer of digital audio workstations and virtual musical instruments. Greg recently retired after 25 years as the CEO of Cakewalk. Welcome, Greg.
Thanks, Brian.
Greg, when you started Cakewalk back in 1987, the software business was a lot different compared to where it is today. The explosion in apps for mobile computing platforms, for example, wasn't much of a factor back then. But when today's developers think about forming a company around an app, they're going to face many of the same issues that you did. We prioritized some of those in the October column. But what were some of the things that you first confronted when starting up Cakewalk?
Well, I started Cakewalk when I was fresh out of college and pretty wet behind the ears. I actually had a philosophy major, so I was not really prepared to start a company. And the kind of issues were basic things like how do I advertise, how will I provide tech support, how will I deliver the software. And back in 1987, there were different answers from today, like use magazine ads, use the telephone, and use shrink-wrapped software packages. So today, the answers would be more like maybe use AdWords and social media, use email for support, and obviously distribute through some type of online app store. But the basic tasks to be done are pretty similar. You need to make something people need or want. You need to make sure they know about it. Need to make it easy for them to buy it. And you need to support them having a good experience with it. And listen to what they say. So that's basically the set of issues and questions that I had in mind.
Well, what about the move, literally, from a garage-type operation into the formal office space? At some point, the founder can't get the company really going from a spare room in his house. Making that move, signing a lease, setting up offices are probably good indicators that you're managing a real company and not just puttering around with technology. How long was it before Cakewalk made its move, and what was going through your mind then?
Well, it was after my first hire, and I decided it was time for a real office that was not a room in a house. But at first, it was just a room over a pizza parlor, and it was a month-to-month handshake kind of arrangement. Later on, we did sign real leases, but typically 2 or 3 year sublets from someone with the direct lease. So, early on, you can't really know how fast you may grow or if you'll even survive at all. And I think it pays to be flexible and not try to plan too far ahead. So, if you can, be careful about long-term commitments because there might not be any long-term.
After the company gets going, it's inevitable that you'll need to start dealing with the many administrative tasks like hiring, payroll, purchasing, and the like. Did you find that you were diverted from your technical work by these mundane tasks? And if so, how did you deal with that?
Well, for startups today, I think there are so many great services to help with a lot of that administrivia. But a lot of startups cater to the needs of other startups, and larger companies do too. Back in 1987, I just used Quicken to keep track of money, which is a kind of personal finance program, instead of using real double entry accounting software. And although that was a pretty simplistic way to approach it, it gave me a very cash flow oriented view of things that I think served me pretty well over the years. Because although accruals and other accounting abstractions have some truthiness, some truth value, the simple reality for a startup is cash, cash, cash. You need cash to survive and grow. So in terms of getting professional help, my first move was to find an accountant. Taxes are something that I think you've got to get right. My feeling was always taxes are not an area to express creativity. Pay what you owe, maybe even err on the side of paying a little bit more than you have to, and then you can sleep well at night. And then the next professional help was seeking an attorney. Pretty early on, I had a disagreement with another small company, and that was a slightly painful but very valuable lesson to have early on about the value of having an attorney help you review a contract. So I found an attorney, and that became an important relationship over many years. And my attorney had a realistic sense of what to worry about at an early stage and also what not to. Because as important as legal compliance is, I'd caution early startup founders not to put the cart before the horse. You only have so much time and attention, and the lion's share really needs to go into the business, your customers and your employees. So early on, focus on doing things fairly and ethically, and if you survive long enough, there'll be time later to review every detail and maybe fix some things. So, of course, get as much review and counsel as you can afford and realistically can implement and, really make use of. And, of course, never knowingly violate a law or regulation. I'm just saying don't put the cart before the horse. Focus first on what you can do ethically and fairly to make the company survive, and otherwise it probably won't matter.
What about the sales and marketing efforts? As the founder and CEO, and probably the number one guru regarding Cakewalk's technology, did your sales staff bring you along to help close deals? What was that like? Did you enjoy it?
Well, we sold music software directly to customers, almost exclusively early on, and only later to small music stores. So in our case, it wasn't so much a deal pipeline. It was more the basic marketing of telling the story to customers. Here's what we have, here's what you can do with it, it's affordable, please buy it. And listening to customer feedback, what are their complaints, what are their suggestions, and rolling that into new versions. And, just really kind of repeating that cycle over and over. So as a result, because that's a fairly natural and authentic process, it felt comfortable to me. But, if someone is starting a company where the cash comes from closing deals or winning clients and retaining them, that's fundamentally a different kind of business. And hopefully the founder will have some experience or knack for that. Because if they have to delegate sales in a business that's fundamentally sales, that's going to be kind of tricky. Good salespeople will be selling to you, their manager, as much to customers, and maybe even more to you. So whatever the core function of the company is, I think you as the founder and CEO need to own that firsthand, at least in the startup phase. Maybe later it's easier to delegate. And, in my case, I was the only founder, but if you have co-founders and you all can specialize in different areas and have a good level of trust, that's also a great way to deal with that.
Now, people who found companies usually end up being the public face of those companies, whether they like it or not, and whether they enjoy it or not, or whether they're good at it or not. Their ability to communicate well is critical, particularly when talking to important customers or investors. What tips can you give to today's entrepreneurs about handling this?
Well, if I could go back in time and give the 20-something version of myself advice, there's probably a lot of advice I'd give. But I think one thing would be that it's okay to be yourself, as opposed to trying to be some concept of what a CEO is supposed to look like or talk like or act like. So, if you're authentically interested in what your company does and you can explain it clearly to normal people, that's the important thing, regardless of your style. So if you're naturally a kind of button-down, preppy sort of person, great, be that person, be yourself. Or if you're more quirky or kind of a hipster, be that. It's only kind of weird if you're trying to act like something that you aren't. And I think really customers, investors, employees, everyone, can kind of pick up on and sort of smell when someone or something is authentic or not. And okay, there's specific skills with communication and so on that you can practice and polish, and you should definitely do that. Just don't feel like you have to adopt some personality or play some role.
How about interacting with your employees? As the company grows, it becomes more difficult to know, let alone socialize with your employees. Were you able to keep a good connection with your employees? How did you do that?
Yeah, I think that was always an interesting question over the years, because in say a 5 or 10 person company where you and the other people are, maybe mostly in your 20s, you're naturally going to socialize and be friendly, and in our case it was music software, so there was almost a little overtone of being in a band together. But as the company grows bigger and maybe more people have families, it's going to be different, and you need to be more proactive and more organized, and actually schedule social gatherings to make sure you get time together and to make sure everyone feels included. I also think it's wise to recognize that you can't be best friends with people who work for you. I mean, you can be friendly and genuinely interested in them and their families and their life outside work, but true friendship is something you need to find outside the company. And that may be challenging when you're spending so much time and energy on a startup, but it's important for you, and by extension a good thing for your company and employees also. So I guess the other advice would be deliberately carve out enough time outside work for friends and for other interests.
Thanks, Greg, for your views on this. Starting a company is hard but exciting work. If you can, seek out others who have done so and get their advice. Network with professional advisors like accountants and lawyers who can share tips based on their experience. Be open to ideas and suggestions that might make the entire process a little easier. We hope that you found this podcast helpful in understanding some issues about starting a software company. Stay tuned for the next installment in Computer Magazine. Until next time, this is Brian Gaff
and Greg Hendershot.
Feel free to contact us via email at bgaff@mwe.com
or at greghendershot@gmail.com.
Thank you.